when I went for the audition, they said, would you like anything to drink? And I said, I've got coffee. So they gave me a cup of coffee. And then they said, let's go through the scene. And I'm so cack-handed that in the process of doing the scene, I spilt the coffee all over myself, which they found very amusing. And my theory is that when I went away and they sat down and thought, who could they get to play Tristan? They just remembered, who's that prat who spilt coffee all over himself? And that's the reason I got it. I think it was quite
so you made an impression.
Unintentionally funny moment that was not by design at all, but it kind of stuck in their minds.
Yeah. And did you enjoy playing that part?
Yeah, it was a brilliant part to play because I had all the funniest bits really. Because sometimes even in the books, if it had been ascribed to James Herriot, they felt that, oh, it'd be funnier if Tristan did this because he just seemed more in keeping with his character. So so I was doing all those fun bits.
Did you find at all that because you were playing a vet in the series that you got people coming up to you in the street or asking, or that's not very well, or
people
like
get very confused. I don't know why. People honestly thought, a lot of people thought, they understood that we were acting, but they thought we were vets who were acting. So they would ask me about, what's wrong with my cow, my dog. Seriously, I mean, not just, they say it as a joke as well, but people would actually say,
And they were expecting you to...
Kind of that we would know, yes. I think it is confusing for people. I can, to this day, move a herd of cows from one side of a field to another. And I have had my arm up a cow, which is an experience in itself. But I couldn't really tell you what was wrong with anything, I'm afraid. Don't ask me.
And how was it working with Robert Hardy and the cast? Were they good people to get on with?
Christopher Timothy was fantastic. He, I think, taught me the best way to get on with the job is just to be as, helpful and think of it as an ensemble piece. He very much did not make himself the star of that show deliberately. He just thought of it as an ensemble piece. Robert Hardy, really, I owe him more than I can say because he was the one who decided that he liked the way that the two brothers worked together. I think I was in episode 2 of All Creatures. It was intended I was only going to be in 5 episodes, I think, of the first 13. And he said to them, look, I really think it's really good the way the two brothers work. Can we have him in more? So I was in every episode after that.
Okay.
So,
moving on briefly, obviously on to Doctor Who, and you're on
that.
And I think it is pretty well documented that you were quite reluctant to take the part of the Doctor at the time.
Yes.
Was that because you felt you weren't right for the part? Was it the fact that you felt that because Tom Baker had done it for such a long time, that it's going to be quite difficult to
It wasn't to do, oddly, it wasn't to do with Tom Baker. I'm asked this question in America a lot, whether it was intimidating following Tom Baker. It actually wasn't for me. I was intimidated by the first 2 Doctors, who were my doctors. And I had grown up with older doctors, and I felt I was young. I kind of knew I was always going to say yes to it, but it was an intimidating thing to be offered because I was much, much younger than anyone else who'd done it. And I loved the series. I grew up watching the series. So I just needed to adjust to it, I think, the idea of doing it. But it's not a part you can turn down. It really isn't. It's like being made... I said to Peter Capaldi a couple of months ago, it's like, did they make you an offer you couldn't refuse? And it is like that, no matter what your trepidation is. And he had, of course, the same trepidation, but in reverse, because he had been aware that, you had this tradition now of young doctors, and here he was an old doctor. But it is, in the end, an offer you just can't turn down.
When you got the part, how much input did you have into how you were going to play that, or anything like that? Did you have I think at one time you appeared on Pebble Mill, I think, one of your first appearances, and somebody said they mentioned you should play it in a certain way at that time.
Yeah, I think maybe the BBC thought I needed help. Yeah, they arranged this interview thing on Pebble Mill at one where they got various people in to suggest how I might play it. And one person said, well, I think you should be like Tristan, but brave. And I think that was my blueprint for how I played the Doctor. But you are given no help at all. First of all, I didn't get any input into the costume. Although I was quite happy with the costume, I would have preferred a kind of more off-the-peg look. The other problem is not only are you given no help, you're really cast as the Doctor, and that is all the assistance you're given. Really, you are cast to make the character out of whatever you do. And so it's not the easiest thing to deal with. And of course, also, the first 2 or 3 scripts you're doing were actually written for the previous Doctor. So I guess The Visitation, probably, and Fort of Doomsday were actually written for Tom by the writers. And obviously Castrovalva was done very quickly for me, so it was a crossover one. So you're not given any help at all, really. You just have to find your way, tiptoe.
Looking back over it, do you feel that it was beneficial to record those stories out of sequence? Because you kind of wanted to do that so you kind of knew where you were going.
Probably. It wasn't an unusual thing in those days to do that. I don't know if they still do it or not. So to give people, say, the third story you do is in fact the first one that goes out. But yes, it was probably helpful. I'm not entirely sure. Because you don't get, although it's, obviously you have 2 stories experience before the first time you're seen, on the other hand, you don't get to think it through in the way that you would do if you're doing a series in logical episodes. So I'm not entirely sure if it helped or not.
Right. Okay. And how did you feel that first series was? How did you feel by the end of it that it had gone for you and the interaction between the companions? And
you're never entirely happy, whatever you do. I don't think I've ever done anything where I thought, yes, I've really cracked that. So you're always in a state of nervous apprehension about it. I was comforted by the fact that the companions seemed to like me more than Tom. I think they thought I was slightly nicer to them than Tom had been, apparently. I don't know, I wasn't there. Yeah, so that was very nice. They were all very supportive. I don't know how I felt. To me, it was always not so much. This frustration with what I was doing was always superseded by the frustration with the problems of making the series. In those days you were in a situation where whichever union was playing up at the time, someone would videotape operators would either turn the machines off at 10 o'clock, or the lighting department would just turn the lights off. So you'd be halfway through a scene and everything would just go dunk, and all the lights would go out. So, it was very difficult if you got behind schedule to get back on schedule. That was the problem. We didn't have enough money. We were earning the BBC loads of money. None of it came back into our budget. In fact, every time we earned the BBC more money, the BBC would cut the budget. Because their logic was, not only with our programme, with other programmes, the logic was if you've been successful with this amount of money, you can be just as successful next year with less. That was the way they looked at it.
Did you find that, when you were the Doctor, you had that period of time where obviously there were more companions in the TARDIS than at any other time, I would say. Was that difficult? Do you think that made it?
I don't know if it was difficult. I rather enjoyed it, but it may have been not the best thing. What tended to happen was we got divided up, so you were never with your more than one companion at a time. Certainly when Turlo came along, they had to lock him up all the time because he was trying to kill me. But usually it was one or other of the companions that I ended up being with.
Yeah. And you said something earlier about your costume.
Yes.
What would you have preferred it to have been? Do you think it was too literal? Was that the...
Yes, I would have preferred it to be... I came up with the idea of it being loosely based on a cricketing outfit, having a cricketing theme. A kind of cricket-loving Doctor, because it was a very English sport, slightly eccentric. I would have preferred to go into the Doctor Who closet, or whatever it is, and just pick things off the peg. So a more thrown together look. Yeah. But John was very much into a kind of designer look.
And how was it working with John? How was he to work with at the time?
I enjoyed it. I thought he was great. I said earlier, he loved the programme. He was devoted to the programme. I don't think he was particularly devoted to science fiction or Doctor Who as a kind of a concept. But he got amazing publicity for the show. But we had our disagreements, never badly. It's difficult to explain. He would come to me with an idea and I'd sort of fight against it. Right. But it would always be an amiable discussion.
Yeah.
The main thing we initially clashed over was jokes. He didn't want any jokes in it at all.
Do you think I was because of what Tom had done?
Yes, it was a sort of overreaction to Tom's time as the Doctor, where everything had turned into a joke, and I found some of the jokes very funny, but I understood what he meant. Even at the point of crisis, you're cracking jokes about jelly babies, and it gets a bit, Yeah. And John didn't like that, so every time we tried to put a joke in, he'd try and cut it out. and we try and put it in again, and he'd try and cut it out. So, and he had ideas. I didn't particularly, God bless you, Nicola, but I didn't particularly agree with the idea of having an American companion. You know, John's logic was very simple. If you have an American companion, it will make the program more popular in America. Well, the problem was, having done, you know, conventions in America, I was very aware that American fans liked the fact it was British.
Got very British.
Yeah, and that's what they particularly liked about it. We couldn't compete on the level of production values, but they liked the kind of slightly eccentric quality of the program because it was British, and so I didn't think that